In this world, healers fall into a rigid hierarchy, first class at the top, third class at the bottom. But outside this ranked system lives a healer like no other, a rogue practitioner with no credentials, no allegiance, and no limits. Shrouded in secrecy and surrounded by women, he heals who he wants, when he wants, if the price is right. Our tale opens with a girl named Lily gently stirring the protagonist, Xenos, from sleep. As he groggily gets up, she's already in the kitchen brewing tea, like it's a scene they've replayed countless mornings. In this world, healing goes far beyond patching up cuts. True healers wield the power to alter destiny itself. In the land of Herzith, the rise of the kingdom is credited largely to healers, respected mags who helped carve the nation's path through their mastery of restorative arts. These elite healers are trained at the Royal Medical Institute, a prestigious center where candidates study advanced healing techniques and earn their official certifications. But not everyone follows this clean-cut route. Hidden in the heart of Herzith is one healer who stands apart, unlicensed, untaught, and undeniably talented. That healer is Xenos. In the next scene, we find him wrapping up a session with a grateful client. After receiving his payment, Xenos waves off the thanks, telling the man that as long as the fee is paid, he'll take care of anyone. With the patient gone, Lily asks whether he's going out for visits. Xenos nods, assuring her he'll return before night. Lily smiles warmly, promising that dinner will be ready when he gets back. Once he steps out, she turns her attention to preparing the evening meal. While she cooks, a woman named Carmilla drops in for a visit. Lily apologizes for the food not being finished yet, and Carmilla leans over the pot to see what's cooking. It's stew. Carmilla already seems hungry, but Lily gently insists she's got everything under control. After all, she adds with confidence, she's the one Xenos will marry. Carmilla smirks and casually strolls off to her room, deciding not to argue. Before long, Zafir arrives at the clinic looking for Xenos. Lily tells her he's out on appointments. Zafir chooses to wait anyway, disappointed that she came early hoping for some one-on-one time. Her plan, however, wasn't so unique. Soon, Linga arrives with the same idea in mind. Lily repeats the same message to her, and Linga pouts, visibly upset. She'd planned to spoil Xenos with affection and was even looking forward to cuddling him. Zafir suggests Linga just go home, but the foxtail girl refuses and insists she'll wait too. Tension rises as they start to argue, but Lily cuts in. In a calm yet stern voice, she reminds them both that she's the one who's supposed to be waiting for him, not them. Right then, the front door bursts open as Lou storms in, claiming she's there for some fun with Xenos. Lily informs her of his absence and tells her to fix the door she nearly tore off its hinges. Lou does as asked, then steps inside, surprised to find the others already gathered. With a grin, she quips that maybe Lily's cooking lured them all here. But the others quickly reject that idea, making it clear that she's the only one who'd show up just for the food. As the stew reached its final stage, Lily stirred in a special blend of herbs with a soft smile. Turning to the others, she mentioned they'd wait for Xenos before digging in, and invited everyone to gather around. No one objected, and Lily looked forward to the shared meal. But before joining them, she stepped outside to bring in the laundry, leaving behind the rich aroma of the stew that was already testing everyone's patience. Lou and Linga exchanged a glance, one of those silent agreements that said, just a little taste won't hurt. In no time, they were sneaking into the kitchen, spoons in hand. One taste led to another, and before they realized it, they couldn't stop. They kept insisting they were only sampling it, but even Zafir could see through their excuses. She warned them that Lily would go ballistic if she found out, but after inhaling the scent herself, Zafir's resolve crumbled. Meanwhile, Lily was outside, humming and folding clothes beneath the afternoon sun, unaware of the chaos erupting in her kitchen. Back inside, the girls finally noticed the pot was empty. Panic set in, and they all started pointing fingers. In desperation, they decided to feign ignorance. Eventually, they accepted that pretending wouldn't help, so Zafir suggested they make a new batch. Just as they began whispering about what ingredients to use, Lily walked in and spotted them huddled around the empty pot like they'd just committed a felony. Jump to dinner, everyone sat at the table, stiff and silent. Lily didn't raise her voice. Her glare was punishment enough. When she quietly asked what happened, the truth spilled out immediately. One blamed the irresistible smell, another said it was muscle memory, and soon enough, they were bickering all over again. Lily sighed and warned them that if they kept it up, Xenos would be truly upset. She expressed disappointment, saying she'd hoped they could enjoy the meal together. The girls quickly apologized and offered to help cook. But Lily admitted she only had enough ingredients for one meal. At that moment, Carmilla stormed in, furious to find her stew devoured. Linga quickly apologized, and the rest followed. Carmilla demanded to know how they intended to make it right, half joking that she might need to devour their souls for compensation. Lily stepped in, insisting they go out and collect the missing ingredients, and the girls agreed without hesitation. As they scrambled to fix things, Lily realized she'd also used up the last of her secret spice blend. Carmilla lingered and raised an eyebrow, asking if Lily wasn't angry about the whole incident. Lily gave a small shrug and said it wasn't worth getting too upset over, earning a stare from Carmilla, who couldn't believe her patience. Carmilla teased that if they touched her wine too, she might have laid a curse on them. Lily gave a nervous chuckle, unsure if she was serious. Still, her thoughts drifted to whether she'd even managed to finish cooking before Xenos returned. Elsewhere in town, Xenos was walking through a quiet street when he noticed a young demi-human girl clutching her stomach. Moments later, a man arrived, calling her his slave. He angrily demanded to know why she had run off. She explained that she'd been sick and went to a clinic, but they denied her treatment because she had no money. Enraged, the man dragged her away like she was nothing more than property. He hauled her all the way to a graveyard and dumped her on the ground. He sneered, saying the place suited a creature like her and completely missed the moment her spirit snapped. He kicked her again, yelling at her to start digging and find something valuable, ignoring her pain and desperation. As he turned to walk away, she suddenly lashed out, her body overtaken by a fierce spirit. She struck him, drawing blood. Terrified, the man stumbled back, only to crash into Xenos. Panicked, the man begged for help, claiming his slave had gone mad. Xenos stood calmly, telling him to move aside. As the man pointed at the girl, Xenos asked what he had done to her. The man responded that he only told her to get back to work, but when Xenos asked what kind of work, the man hesitated, lying and calling it simple farm labor. The man suddenly changes his tone, groaning about his injuries and pleading for medical assistance. He even tries to bribe Xenos into stopping the enraged girl. Just then, the possessed slave lunges toward her master, but Xenos steps between them, shielding the noble. Calm but firm, he questions her fury. In response, she hurls rocks at him, which he evades effortlessly. The noble, clearly impressed, urges Xenos to eliminate her, but he refuses, stating that a healer's role is to save, not destroy. The noble then reveals his high status and cynically notes that if the chaos continues, he may not survive, but he can always purchase another slave if this one dies. Ignoring the noble's callousness, Xenos declares his unwavering intent to save every life he can. The slave charges at him, this time hurling a massive stone. Drawing on a hidden power, Xenos smashes it with a single strike. The noble stares, dumbfounded, wondering what kind of healer could possess such strength. Without pause, the girl resumes her attack, moving with unnatural speed. Xenos realizes she might be something far beyond a mere demi-human. She swipes at him with her claws, but he erects a barrier just in time. Her own force injures her, yet she fights on, hate burning in her eyes. That's when Xenos begins to suspect she's under the influence of a malicious entity. As she closes in, she bites down hard on his shoulder. In that surreal moment, he's startled by the realization, spirits can not only possess people but seemingly converse and act on emotion. Steeling himself, he channels healing energy into her, targeting the physical wounds while simultaneously purging the dark presence from her soul. Even as he works, he wonders what kind of backbreaking labor could make someone so vulnerable to possession. Once he finishes, he quietly mutters that his workday is over. The noble watches in disbelief as the girl's crushed foot is fully healed. Panicked, the noble begs for treatment too, reminding Xenos that healing is his duty. Xenos, calm and detached, says he's done for the day and suggests coming back tomorrow. The noble protests, he might not live that long. Pushing for immediate care, he's met with a warning, the price won't be cheap. Frantic, the noble offers all the money he has, insisting it should cover the cost. But Xenos shakes his head. The amount falls short. The noble complains that it's already above market rates and threatens consequences if this is illegal, only for Xenos to bluntly admit he's an unlicensed practitioner. Stunned, the noble stammers at the revelation, and Xenos dryly adds that it's a shady business, akin to grave robbing. The noble pretends not to understand, but Xenos sees through the act. He demands the girl's ownership papers to complete the payment. The noble, uncaring, agrees and accepts the deal before leaving after his treatment. When he's gone, the girl stirs awake, disoriented. She's surprised to find Xenos hovering nearby, her body aching. She asks who he is, and he plainly states his name and that she now belongs to him. He asks her name in return, and she quietly replies, Tilly. Xenos tells her to undress, explaining that he paid a great deal for her and needs to assess her physical health thoroughly. Though hesitant, she complies, realizing resistance is futile. As he examines her, he discovers a blockage in her bile duct caused by gallstones and serious inflammation. He reveals that he had suspected something was wrong, her jaundiced complexion had tipped him off, prompting him to follow her. In seconds, he uses his abilities to heal her. Stunned, she asks what he just did. Calmly, he explains that he opened her up, removed the gallstones, and sealed her back, all without a trace. She's dumbfounded, there were no incantations, no runes, and not even a scar. He acts like it's routine, claiming any healer could do it. She immediately disagrees, saying most definitely could not. Moved, she sincerely thanks him, unsure how she'll ever repay him. He then mentions he has a favor to ask. Without hesitation, she agrees, eager to return the kindness. He shows her a sketch of an herb and asks if she can find it. She says yes and offers to guide him. Not long after, she locates the exact herb, which turns out to be the same one Lily had used earlier in her cooking. When he thanks her, she dismisses it, saying it was no trouble, though she admits she was expecting a much different kind of request. Xenos informed her that her role was finished, but she didn't feel satisfied with her contribution. He disagreed, explaining that he only accepts rewards equivalent to the effort he puts in. She still didn't believe she had done anything deserving of his help, but he assured her otherwise. It might have seemed insignificant, but without her, his success wouldn't have been possible. Without waiting for a reply, he ripped up the contract and told her she was free to live her life as she pleased. She admitted she had no idea what that life looked like yet, but when she figured it out, she promised to come back and tell him. He had no objections. He wished her luck and told her to seek him out again if she ever found herself in trouble. That evening, he returned to his place. Lily was the first to greet him, letting him know dinner wasn't ready yet. Moments later, the three who'd gone out to find ingredients returned. Xenos eyed them, wondering why they even bothered showing up. They kept quiet about already eating his portion, and Lily opted to prepare something else. As Xenos moved to another room, Carmilla spotted him and gave him a knowing smirk. She could tell right away he'd been with another woman. He glared at her and told her to keep quiet. Lily offered to finish dinner, but he stopped her. She immediately understood what he really wanted was some black tea. She smiled and said she'd go make some. We then shift to a memory. Xenos had once been a part of an elite adventuring group known as the Golden Phoenix. But that all ended the day their so-called leader, Aston, tossed him a single gold coin like spare change and told him he was out. Aston called him dead weight, claiming the party no longer needed him. Xenos knew the truth, he had always been the one holding the reckless group together. But Aston never cared about that. To him, Xenos was a convenient pawn, someone disposable if things went bad. Now that the team had grown stronger, they figured he wasn't necessary anymore. Xenos tried to reason with him, reminding Aston that they survived only because he was there to clean up their messes and heal their wounds. But Aston sneered at his unrefined healing skills, saying any competent healer could replace him. Elsewhere, in a filthy alley, two slave traders were attempting to restrain an elf girl. The cruel woman warned her partner to avoid bruising the girl. They fetched higher prices unmarked. The man had already pinned the girl down, but Lily wasn't giving in. She drove her heel straight into his groin, forcing him off. As he collapsed in agony, she sprinted away. She nearly escaped, but the man grabbed a bow and loosed an arrow into her ankle. She crashed to the ground, unable to move. He caught up and tried to pin her again, but she bit into his hand with everything she had. He was forced to stab her to break free. At that moment, Xenos appeared in the alley and saw Lily lying there, bleeding and fading fast. He looked at the two slavers and asked if they were responsible. They didn't deny it. Instead, they barked at him to back off, reminding him that slavery was legal in these parts. They insisted Lily was their property, free to do with as they pleased. Xenos considered the legal bind he was in. Technically, they weren't breaking the law. But he had an idea. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the same gold coin Aston had thrown at him in disdain. He offered it to them in exchange for Lily. It was nowhere near enough to buy an elf, even a wounded one. But seeing how close she was to dying, the slavers figured she wasn't worth the effort. Without much thought, they took the coin and walked away. Xenos approached Lily and knelt beside her. She was conscious but barely, and told him to leave her. She didn't want to be a burden. But he calmly told her that she wasn't going to die today. She looked down and blinked in disbelief. Her wounds were gone, fully healed as if they'd never happened. She whispered her thanks, apologizing for making him spend his gold for her, but he brushed it off. He had no intention of holding on to that coin. It was a bitter reminder of Aston, and he was glad to be rid of it. He asked Lily if she had a place to go, but she shook her head. She had nowhere. Well, considering she was a slave just moments ago, it's not like she has a place to stay or any money to her name. She also mentioned she's starving, so Xenos decides to grab her something to eat and maybe pick up some clean clothes on the way. They stop by a nearby diner, and before going in, he hands her a fresh outfit to change into. Lily beams as she digs into the food, savoring every bite like it's the first decent meal she's had in ages. But soon she notices that Xenos hasn't ordered anything for himself. She asks him why, and he casually says he's not hungry. The truth, though, is that he's completely out of cash. He spent the last of his money on her meal and outfit, and with no home and no more income, especially after getting kicked out of Golden Phoenix, he needs a plan, fast, or he might end up on the streets himself. As they sit in the diner, a man stumbles through the door, visibly injured. His arm is badly burned and bleeding. He looks like he just escaped some serious trouble. Xenos observes silently. The wound is deep, and the burn pattern suggests a magic weapon was involved. Judging by his reptilian features, he's a lizard folk, which means his body can heal on its own, but it'll take time and he'll suffer the entire way through. Without saying a word, Xenos raises a hand and casts a healing spell. In seconds, the damage fades like it was never there. The man stares in shock at his restored limb, then turns to Xenos, demanding to know who he is. Before Xenos can answer, Lily jumps in, proudly calling him a legendary healer. The man has never heard of Xenos, but he's clearly impressed and grateful. He hands over a few coins in thanks and promises to spread the word about the mysterious healer. At first, Xenos doesn't understand why he's being paid, but then it clicks. Most healers charge for their services. That simple gesture plants a seed. If he plays his cards right, he could make a living doing this. But there's a hitch. Being from the slums, he can't get a proper healing license. Starting a legit clinic would mean paperwork, taxes, and dealing with government oversight. And like someone once said, dodging taxes isn't a crime, it's survival. So Xenos makes up his mind, he's going underground. A healer for hire, no questions asked. Lily doesn't follow all the legal stuff, but she's all in if he's really starting a clinic. Xenos hesitates. Running an unlicensed clinic is risky, and dragging a kid into it doesn't sit right. But Lily points out that he technically bought her. In this twisted society, that makes him her master, meaning she's sticking with him no matter what. Xenos didn't pay to own her. He just didn't want her to die in an alley. But Lily lays it out, she has nowhere else to go. If he ditches her now, she'll probably end up back in chains, and that'd be on him. Reluctantly, he gives in, and she lights up, swearing to serve him with everything she's got, which makes Xenos cough and ask her not to make it sound so weird. Anyway, priority 1, they need a place to crash. So he takes her to one of the most rundown, forgotten corners of the city. The place looks cursed and barely livable, exactly what he's after. Lily looks around nervously and asks why they're in such a creepy place. Xenos explains that if he's running a shady clinic, he can't have the Royal Association sniffing around. A spot this dead is perfect, no attention, no rent. Lily gets the logic, but she's clearly unsettled. She points out that areas like this are infamous for monster infestations, especially the freaky ones. Eventually, they find a building that's still standing. Xenos figures it'll do. Lily, though, freezes. It looks like something out of a horror story, classic haunted house energy. Worst case, they might run into a wraith. Xenos frowns, not familiar with the term. Lily explains, wraiths are ghost-like creatures that can literally turn people into spirits with just one touch. They step inside. It's pitch black. Lily, trying to help, casts a basic light spell, and Xenos is caught off guard. He didn't know she could use magic at all. Lily brushes off the situation, calling it nothing complicated. But once the room lights flicker on, the reality of their new surroundings hits them, just as grimy and rundown as Lily suspected. Cobwebs drape the corners, dust covers every surface, and the walls are cracked. It's a total mess. Still, Xenos seems oddly cheerful. It may look haunted, but the roof doesn't leak, and the building's bones are strong. That's more than enough for him to begin his work. Just as they start to get comfortable, though, they discover a serious issue. The place isn't as empty as they thought. Out from the shadows drifts a ghostly figure, a real wraith, who informs Xenos that she fully intends to drain the life from him. Lily freaks out, but Xenos only sighs, already exasperated. Clearly, this isn't the peaceful clinic he had in mind. The wraith, introducing herself as Carmilla, doesn't wait, she charges straight at him. Without breaking a sweat, Xenos blasts her arms clean off with a surge of radiant healing energy. He doesn't even blink. Compared to the nightmares he dealt with in the depths of the labyrinth, courtesy of Aston throwing him into danger whenever he got moody, this is nothing. He's faced countless wraiths before, maybe 100 or more. Healing spells, particularly state-level ones, are lethal to the undead. Still calm, Xenos apologizes to Carmilla, explaining he didn't know she was living there and asking if she'd be willing to share the space. Housing is impossible to find, after all. Carmilla is stunned by his boldness. She's the queen of wraiths, and this guy is asking to bunk in her domain. Furious, she snaps her fingers and calls forth a swarm of angry spirits to evict him. Xenos just sighs again and wipes them all out with another mass healing spell, erasing them like they were drawn in chalk. Now it's Carmilla who's unnerved. She realizes this man could easily erase her, too, if he wanted. But Xenos isn't looking for a fight. He explains he just needs a place to live and work, offering a deal. Let him and Lily use the ground floor and he'll stay out of the upper level. Carmilla knows she's outmatched and reluctantly agrees. She keeps the upstairs, and the newcomers get the first floor. Xenos is satisfied. Lily, on the other hand, isn't sure who's scarier, the ghostly queen upstairs or the unshakable healer she works with. By morning, Lily's itching for something to do. With no patients yet, she offers to advertise their services, but Xenos shuts the idea down fast. Going public would draw attention, especially from the Royal Hospital, and that kind of spotlight could be dangerous. He advises her to wait. Someone's bound to come. Right on cue, the door creaks open and in steps a familiar face. Lily perks up to greet the visitor, only to see it's the same guy Xenos treated the previous day. As Xenos predicted, someone involved in a magic shootout probably isn't keen on government-run hospitals. The lizard-like man introduces himself as Xand and says he needs help for his sister. Xenos agrees to examine her, and Zofia, his sister, pulls back her sleeve to reveal a wound. It looks minor, but she says it's been feeling off since yesterday. One glance is all Xenos needs to see the truth. The injury is laced with magic-infused poison. Zofia asks if he can treat it, but Xenos explains that the infection has gone untreated too long, the surrounding tissue is ruined. The safest option now is to amputate before the poison spreads. Zofia accepts this grim news without flinching and asks what the operation will cost. Xenos quotes a flat rate, 1 million yen. Xand immediately loses it, furious that such a steep price is being charged for removing an arm. He looks ready to fight, but Zofia calms him down and shifts to diplomacy. She tries leveraging her status, asking if he really wants to charge someone like her that kind of money. Zofia the Tornado, one of the leaders of the area's 3 biggest gangs. Xenos knows who she is, but it doesn't change his stance. He doesn't work for free, especially not when it involves regenerative healing. That makes Sophia pause. She's never heard of someone regrowing entire limbs. Zenos is surprised she hasn't. He assumed it was common knowledge. He learned all his healing spells on his own, so he never really picked up what was considered normal. But that's not important. He asks if she wants him to go ahead. Sophia nods, ready for the procedure. She lies down while Zenos prepares for surgery. He forms a scalpel made entirely of focused magical energy, a shimmering blade that hums with power. Sophia eyes it warily, having never seen anything like it, but Zenos assures her it's safe. It's incredibly sharp, completely clean, and tailor-made for surgical precision. Once again, he's baffled why no other healers use such a tool. He begins by numbing the target area with a controlled stream of healing magic. Once the pain is dulled, he swiftly removes the infected section and immediately starts the regeneration process. His hands pulse with greater intensity as the spell surges, carefully reconstructing the limb layer by layer, from the skeletal structure to muscle and finally skin. Sophia watches in stunned silence as her new arm takes shape. When she finally flexes her fingers, it feels completely real, like it was never lost at all. She admits that Zenos is worth every coin he charges and, as a gesture of thanks, promises to send any wounded allies from her crew his way. Zenos doesn't mind, as long as they're paying clients like everyone else. In the days that follow, an influx of injured lizard men begins arriving at his clinic. Noticing how drained Zenos looks, Lily brews him some tea to help ease the fatigue. Zenos expresses his gratitude, but notices 3 cups instead of 2. Lily casually explains the third is for Carmilla. Zenos doubts she'd join, but to his surprise, Carmilla actually enjoys tea. As the 3 of them sit in rare quiet, Lily brings up the rising number of injured lizard men and wonders aloud what might be causing it. From the types of wounds he's treated, Zenos suspects an ongoing turf conflict between rival factions. Almost on cue, the clinic's door is violently kicked open. A group of werewolves storms in, led by a fierce woman named Linga, who wastes no time declaring her intent to kill Zenos. She's been battling the lizard men for days, and no matter how many fall, they keep coming back stronger, thanks to Zenos' healing. So she wants to cut the source off entirely. Zenos calmly responds that he doesn't take sides and has no interest in turning his clinic into a war zone. Linga doesn't care. She's already signaled the attack. Her crew charges, but Zenos' barrier magic renders their assault useless. Every blow bounces harmlessly off him like twigs hitting stone. Frustrated, Linga turns to smashing the clinic itself, a serious mistake. Because while Zenos runs the clinic, it's also Carmilla's home. And if there's one rule that cannot be broken, it's damaging her domain. The second she appears, the werewolves freeze. Facing a wraith, especially the Wraith Queen, is a death sentence. Carmilla nearly turned them to ash, but Zenos intervened. He reminded her it was still a place of healing, not slaughter, and asked her to let them go if they fixed what they broke. She gave them a glare that could curdle blood but eventually backed off and returned upstairs. Seeing how even someone like Carmilla listened to Zenos, Linga's entire demeanor changed. She dropped to her knees, begged for mercy, and swore to fix the clinic and control her people from now on. The very next day, an orc arrived at the door with a message. Lu, the orc leader, requested a meeting with Zenos in person. Zenos wasn't shocked, he had already dealt with 2 of the faction heads. Lu, a powerhouse among orcs and ogres, had built an empire mining magic stones with brute strength alone. He wasn't thrilled to deal with her, but figured if he settled things with Lu, no one would challenge his clinic again. Before leaving, he asked the orc if Lu was the kind of person who could be reasoned with. The orc swore Lu was the most wise and noble individual he'd ever met, which sounded promising. Still, Zenos wondered why Lu hadn't just come herself. When he asked, the orc said she wasn't physically able to move at the moment. That raised alarm bells, so Zenos didn't waste time and followed him immediately. They traveled deep into a cave system, where Zenos finally met Lu. She welcomed him cordially, but before proceeding, he asked how she'd even heard of him. Lu laughed and said the lizard men and werewolves had been bragging non-stop about their miracle healer, even though they were supposed to keep him secret. Clearly, his time as a back alley medic wasn't going to last much longer at this pace, but that was a problem for later. Lu had heard whispers that Zenos could mend any wound for a price, and now she was here to see if the rumors held weight. As he approached, he lifted his hand toward her, prompting Lu to demand what exactly he was doing. Zenos calmly explained he couldn't find any visible injuries, so he was checking for internal issues instead. That surprised Lu. Most healers didn't even attempt that kind of diagnosis, but Zenos found it baffling. How else could someone properly treat a patient without knowing what was going on beneath the surface? After finishing the scan, he quickly detected something unusual. Deep within her abdomen, he sensed a dense cluster of mana. It was likely a mana stone. Lu confirmed his suspicion and added that it wasn't just any ordinary stone. It had been enchanted with explosive magic. Even the slightest movement might set it off. Zenos immediately assumed someone had tried to poison or assassinate her by slipping the stone into her food, but Lu quickly clarified that it wasn't anything that dramatic. She had simply gotten hungry, spotted what looked like a rice ball, and accidentally swallowed it. She insisted it was a genuine mistake, something anyone might have done. Zenos found that hard to believe, but he didn't panic. Mana stones usually pass through the body on their own. He turned to leave, but Lou stopped him. This wasn't so simple. She admitted she had chewed it before swallowing, and that meant the enchantment had already been activated. Time was short. She'd already made peace with the idea of dying because of her blunder, but she didn't want her loyal followers to go down with her. When Xenos asked what she expected from him, Lou said she just wanted him to inherit her fortune. If she died, everything she built would collapse, and she'd rather trust him than let it fall into greedy hands. During her research, she learned Xenos charged a premium for healing, but never took money when treating children. That convinced her he had integrity. She tossed him a key to her treasure vault, but Xenos had never intended to let her die in the first place. Since the explosion hadn't happened yet, he figured the stone hadn't been in her long. He still had time. Without hesitation, he summoned his enchanted scalpel and moved toward her. Lou's guards panicked and rushed to stop him, but they were too slow. Xenos was already at work. Within seconds, he sliced open her abdomen, removed the unstable mana stone, and healed her wound flawlessly. The room fell silent as he held the dangerous object in his hand. It was still primed to explode, so to prevent disaster, Xenos wrapped his hands around it tightly and contained the blast. The resulting explosion could have turned the entire cavern into rubble, but he had fortified his hands with protective magic. It hurt like hell, but he was fine. Afterward, he handed the key back to Lou, telling her the donation wasn't necessary anymore. She was stunned that he chose to save her life rather than take her wealth. But Xenos just shrugged. He charged for his services, sure, but taking everything she owned would have been going too far. Right then, Lou decided she genuinely liked him. She told him that if he ever needed anything at all, he just had to say the word. She even offered to post her soldiers outside his clinic as protection, but Xenos politely turned her down. Orc guards would draw the wrong kind of attention. Days passed. Lily sat at the clinic's front desk, looking grumpy. She was irritated because Sophia, Linga, and Lou had all been dropping by far more often than usual. Xenos noticed it too. The three of them kept showing up without any injuries, which made him wonder what their real motives were. At first, he figured they were just bored, but Carmilla corrected him. She said it was obvious, they were all smitten with him. Xenos couldn't wrap his head around that idea. In his mind, he was just a humble underground healer, nothing more. But Carmilla seemed certain, she knew love when she saw it. Lily grew uneasy at the idea that one of the girls might win Xenos over, but he reassured her firmly that he wasn't interested in dating any of them. It wasn't meant to be offensive, he just thought they were all a bit unhinged. Still, Carmilla joked that it was only a matter of time before those three turned on each other in a full-blown war for Xenos' affection. He brushed it off, thinking it was too ridiculous to ever happen, until the very next morning, when Sophia strolled into the clinic with a fruit basket and casually mentioned she was about to start a war against the other two. She wouldn't say why, only that it was necessary. Moments later, Linga and Luz arrived as well, both bearing their own strange gifts and echoing the same desire to wage war on the others. Xenos was mortified, loudly urging them to back down, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Carmilla, for her part, found the whole thing widely entertaining, claiming people were about to die just because Xenos couldn't keep his charm to himself. Xenos definitely didn't see it that way, but he couldn't deny he was in deep trouble. The battle had already been scheduled for noon, and he knew he couldn't just sit around while they tore each other apart over something so absurd. At the designated arena, Sophia, Linga, and Luz had assembled their troops, ready for an all-out clash. Tension filled the air as the battle was moments from erupting, when suddenly Xenos appeared, drawing everyone's attention. The three girls turned to him, expecting some final plea or command, but instead, Xenos calmly declared he wasn't going to interfere. He acknowledged their mutual resentment and decided it was better to let them resolve it themselves rather than impose peace they clearly didn't want. With Xenos' unexpected approval, the girls agreed to fight at full strength. To raise the stakes, they added a reward: whoever survived the war would win Xenos' virginity. He was certain he hadn't agreed to that part, but before he could object, the fight had already begun. Sophia launched the first strike, her dagger slicing through the air toward Linga's throat. Linga nimbly avoided the attack, flipping backward out of reach. At the same time, Luz flew in with a wild dropkick meant for Sophia, who narrowly dodged, causing Luz to crash into a cluster of unfortunate spectators like a wrecking ball. Sophia and Linga clashed again, locking weapons in a fierce struggle for dominance. Just as one looked poised to strike a decisive blow, Luz dove back in from above, nearly crushing them both with her impact. Sophia tumbled into a section crowded with orcs, forcing her to fight her way back into the arena, and chaos rapidly spread. Soon, each faction was battling the others in a whirlwind of swords, fists, and spells. Surprisingly, even after 6 brutal hours of non-stop combat, no one had fallen. That's when Sophia noticed something odd. Her injuries were vanishing before her eyes. Everything froze in confusion, and Xenos stepped forward, finally explaining what was going on. He said he'd agreed to let them go wild, but he never said he'd let anyone die. As their healer, he made it his job to keep every single one of them alive, and that's exactly what he'd been doing the whole time. Sophia realized how foolish she'd been to overlook that possibility. None of them had ever expected that Xenos could maintain healing on such a massive scale for so long. The message became clear: their battle would never end as long as he kept healing them. Xenos pointed out that unless they found a way to cooperate, they'd be stuck in this endless loop of violence. And to make his point absolutely clear, he informed them he'd be charging each of them by the hour for every bit of healing they received. The girls, now completely exhausted and seeing the futility of it all, finally agreed to call a truce between their factions. However, their personal rivalry for Xenos was far from over. They just agreed to keep the competition peaceful from now on. Later, Lily walked up to Xenos, genuinely curious why he'd gone to such lengths to stop the battle. Xenos paused, remembering something his old mentor once told him. A third-rate healer can fix wounds. A second-rate healer can restore a body. But a true healer, the best of the best, can change the world. Xenos often admitted he wasn't sure he was cut out to be a top-tier healer, but that didn't mean he wouldn't give it his all. He genuinely wanted to make life in the slums better, even if he masked that sincerity with sarcasm. He'd joke that if everyone dropped dead, he'd lose all his clients. Lily smiled at that, seeing through his harsh tone to the compassion underneath. She knew full well that his so-called coldness was just a shield. After all, peace meant fewer injuries, which also meant fewer earnings for him. Yet he still prioritized harmony over personal gain. That kind of heart was exactly what made Lily admire him, and she even told him so. Predictably, the compliment went completely over Xenos' head, leaving him a bit puzzled. Regardless, the day was drawing to a close, and Xenos figured it was time to collect his fee and head back. Lily was caught off guard. She'd assumed his earlier remarks about charging for battlefield healing were a joke. Turns out, he had meant every word. Treating an entire arena full of injured people wasn't easy, and he wasn't about to let that effort go unpaid. Meanwhile, in the capital, the head of the Royal Knights was meeting in secret with his deputy, Krishna. Sensing something was bothering the commander, Krishna asked if anything was wrong. He revealed that a strange rumor had reached him. Apparently, the long-running conflict between the slum's demi-human factions had abruptly ceased. Krishna was skeptical. Those groups had been at each other's throats for ages. A sudden ceasefire didn't make any sense. The commander agreed it was hard to believe, but if true, it posed a serious risk. The kingdom's stability had long depended on the downtrodden fighting among themselves. If they united, they could start demanding dangerous things, like rights, fair treatment, or even public healthcare. That kind of rebellion couldn't be allowed. Word was, a single person had managed to broker the peace. The commander tasked Krishna with identifying and neutralizing this individual before things spiraled. Without hesitation, Krishna accepted. She vowed to find this so-called peacemaker and bring him in for the crime of ending the precious chaos. Back at Xenos' humble clinic, he sneezed suddenly, prompting everyone to worry he might be falling ill. Linga offered her tail as a cozy wrap. Alu, ever shameless, invited him to warm up using her famously soft lap. Lily, unfortunately, had neither a tail nor a cushion to offer, and the sight left her quietly devastated. Xenos quickly brushed off the fuss, insisting it was just a sneeze. He reminded everyone he still needed to treat Zofia, so they should stop crowding him. Once her arm was healed, he casually asked how she'd managed to get herself banged up, since she rarely needed patching up anymore. Zofia admitted she'd been injured during a job the night before. She normally targeted corrupt nobles and gave their wealth back to the poor, Robin Hood style. But this time, she'd broken into the wrong estate. There, she ran into Krishna, the vice commander known for her ruthless tactics and magical firearms. Hearing this, Carmilla grew uneasy. Drawing Krishna's attention could spell serious danger for Xenos. But he didn't seem too worried. He figured someone of her status wouldn't care about a low-level back alley healer. Meanwhile, Krishna had already entered the slums, quietly gathering intel. She noticed how unusually calm and united the demi-human population had become, which raised suspicions. She approached a lizard man and bluntly asked who was behind the ceasefire. He didn't recognize her but knew full well Xenos wanted to stay anonymous, so he kept his mouth shut and tried to leave. Krishna wasn't letting that slide. She pulled her gun and threatened to shoot his favorite stick if he didn't speak. But the lizard man held firm, ready to take a bullet to protect Xenos. Just then, Zofia and her brother walked by. Spotting them, Krishna realized a confrontation wasn't ideal right now, and she quickly slipped away into the city's abandoned quarter. While wandering, she stumbled upon Xenos' clinic by accident and decided to ask for directions back to the main city. Xeno kindly offered to help, but just as he was about to do so, Lily entered the room carrying some tea. When Krishna saw Lily's elf ears, her expression darkened immediately. Without hesitation, she pulled out her magic fire gun and shot a blast straight at Xeno's head. Lily was stunned by the sudden attack and couldn't believe Krishna would shoot Xeno like that. Krishna, however, defended her actions, claiming she had a valid reason. In addition to her main mission, she was investigating a series of recent kidnappings in the area, and seeing a human like Xenos with an elf like Lily, Krishna immediately assumed Xenos was involved in the kidnappings. She acted on instinct and fired. Lily, however, quickly corrected her, revealing that Xeno had adopted her and that she was living there willingly. Realizing she might have jumped to conclusions, Krishna took a moment to reconsider. It did seem odd that someone as cheerful as Lily could be a kidnapping victim. Fortunately, Krishna had used non-lethal bullets, so she was fairly sure she hadn't killed Xeno, though he might have been knocked unconscious by the blast. To her surprise, Xeno seemed completely fine. Krishna apologized for acting on a hasty assumption but was curious how Zeno had survived the shot. Zeno explained that he had used defensive magic to block the bullet before it could reach him, but Krishna doubted this. She pointed out that normal defensive magic shouldn't be able to stop her bullets. Zeno, unaware of what Krishna was getting at, simply stated that his magic was ordinary in nature. However, Krishna, with her vast experience as the vice commander of the Royal Knights, recognized the defensive spell. It was the same kind of shield used by Grand Sorcerers. As soon as she mentioned her position in the Royal Knights, both Zeno and Lily grew tense, understanding that her presence could bring them trouble. Still, Krishna had something she wanted from Zeno. Trying to avoid further conflict, Zeno agreed to talk with her but discreetly warned his clients not to visit while Krishna was present. The three sat down together, and Krishna explained that she was on a covert mission and needed Zeno's help. Zeno initially refused, but Krishna argued that it was the duty of every citizen to assist the knights. Given her volatile nature, Zeno figured refusing could lead to another bullet, so he reluctantly agreed. Krishna then revealed that her mission was to locate and arrest a specific individual. She didn't have a name or description, but she was after the mediator responsible for ending the conflict between the factions. Zeno choked on his tea as he realized that the person Krishna was after was none other than him, though he kept his composure and calmly asked why she was pursuing the mediator. Krishna explained that the knights could not ignore someone with the power to bring peace between the factions. When she had tried to gather information from the locals, they refused to talk, even under her threats. Krishna believed that if the people in the slums weren't willing to betray the mediator, it meant he must be a dangerous figure who needed to be stopped. Zeno tried to reason with her, suggesting that the mediator could be deliberately keeping a low profile, and that if she left him alone, the mediator wouldn't cause any problems. Krishna asked if Zeno knew who the mediator was, and he quickly came up with an excuse, claiming he was just speaking hypothetically. Despite his protest, Krishna remained adamant that she couldn't ignore the mediator, as her orders from her commander were clear, and anyone capable of ending the faction conflict was a serious threat. Lily reassures Krishna that there's no need to worry about the mediator destabilizing the country, as his only interest is earning a living through honest work. However, from the way Lily speaks about him, it sounds like she knows the mediator personally. Lily quickly panics and assures Krishna that she doesn't know him, which makes Krishna a bit suspicious, though she decides to let it go for now. As it gets late, Zenos takes the opportunity to suggest Krishna should leave, but while escorting her out, Krishna notices the bed placed in the corner. She finds it odd that Zenos would position a bed there, causing him to become anxious. He explains nervously that it's just an extra bed, but Krishna promptly asks if she'd be able to use it. She's been struggling to find a base of operations in the slums and would greatly appreciate staying here until her assignment is complete. Of course, she's willing to pay for the lodging. Zenos can't really refuse without raising suspicion, so he reluctantly agrees, much to Carmilla's amusement. Lily then prepares some green tea for their guest, but Krishna struggles with hot drinks, so she begins blowing on it to cool it down. Lily, feeling envious of another woman seeking Zenos' attention, decides to assert her dominance. She sits on Zenos' lap and asks him to stroke her head like usual. Zenos complies, though he's confused by her sudden demand. Carmilla, amused by the situation, whispers to him that Lily is feeling jealous. Zenos is taken aback by Carmilla's sudden whisper while she's invisible, but she's simply enjoying the drama. Lily, not wanting Krishna to steal Zenos' attention, grows even more affectionate with him, but Krishna remains unfazed, continuing to cool her tea. Eventually, Lily falls asleep, and Zenos gently tucks her into bed before returning to the living room to continue his conversation with Krishna. He explains how he rescued Lily from a slave trader and reveals that the traders were part of an illegal trafficking ring operating in the area. This helps explain Krishna's earlier quick action, but sadly, Zenos doesn't have much intel on the traffickers themselves. Shifting topics, Krishna brings up something that's been on her mind. Noticing Zenos' impressive skill in defensive magic, she asks if someone could regenerate an entire arm with the same effort used in healing magic. Zenos wonders if healing an arm is really that rare for a healer, but before he can finish his thought, Krishna cuts in, insisting that it should be impossible. Only Sansa healers of the highest caliber could accomplish such a feat. Curious, Zenos asks why she's bringing this up. Krishna explains how she recently fought against Sophia, severely damaging her arm, but when she encountered Sophia again yesterday, her arm was fully healed. Krishna is convinced that a healer in the slums with such power must exist, and that person could have significant influence over the faction bosses. She plans to investigate further the next morning, hoping to find clues about this mysterious healer. Zenos, however, is confused as to why she assumes the healer must be evil. In fact, Krishna seems to hold a very negative view of the entire slum, prompting Zenos to ask if she has a particular reason for feeling that way. Krishna admits she might be biased, but her perspective stems from her mother being murdered by someone from the slums. Her mother, a kind-hearted woman, often visited the slums to help those in need, organizing food distributions for the poor. One day, she simply didn't return. Since then, Krishna has been unable to laugh or smile, earning her the nickname Iron Rose. According to witnesses, Krishna's mother was killed in Rag for her wedding ring, a revelation that shattered Krishna. Her mother had saved many lives, yet no one stepped forward to save her in her moment of need. This tragic event drove Krishna to join the Knight's Order, vowing to become an unstoppable force for justice, targeting the criminals in the slums. The following day, Krishna departs to continue her investigation, leaving Zeno to resume treating his patients. Zafia visits the clinic, seeking treatment for a minor injury on her arm. As Zeno tends to her wound, he warns Zafia to be cautious, knowing that Krishna could return at any time. No sooner does he finish his warning than Krishna walks in, asking for directions after once again losing her way. Upon spotting Zafia, Krishna immediately draws her guns, and Zafia responds by pulling out her knives. Tension fills the room as they face off, each prepared for a confrontation. Krishna demands to know if Zafia is working with an evil healer who is recruiting criminals to harm innocent people. Zafia doesn't deny the existence of such a healer but insists that he is not evil. She admits to being a thief, but she claims that the nobility's crimes are far more heinous. Zafia reveals that she has done her own research into the trafficking ring Krishna is investigating. Contrary to Krishna's belief that the operation is restricted to the slums, Zafia uncovers that the true mastermind is an aristocrat. Krishna is skeptical, as she knows the trafficking ring operates in the slums, but Zafia insists this is a deliberate ruse to mislead the Knight's Order. Reluctantly, Krishna asks who Zafia suspects, and Zafia names Calendar. Krishna is taken aback. Calendar is a well-known philanthropist who has a reputation for his work educating orphan children. It's hard for Krishna to believe that someone with such a public image could be involved in child trafficking. Zafia, anticipating Krishna's disbelief, points out that Krishna views everyone from the slums as criminals, unlike the mediator who treats everyone fairly and offers second chances, regardless of their background. Krishna's anger flares at Zafia's criticism of her sense of justice, and just as she prepares to fire, Zeno intervenes. Zeno steps in front of Krishna, demanding that she lower her weapon. Krishna orders him to step aside, but Zeno refuses, explaining that Zafia is his patient, and he won't let her come to harm. He then confesses that he is the mediator Krishna has been searching for. Krishna dismisses this as a lie, convinced that Zeno cannot possibly be the healer, especially given his proficiency in defensive magic. There's no way he could also excel in healing magic. Zeno admits he's no master, but he believes both healing and defensive magic are based on enhancing the body's natural processes, and he's confident in his ability with both. Krishna, unconvinced, accuses him of siding with Zafia. However, out of respect for the hospitality Zeno showed her the day before, she decides to leave without further conflict. As Krishna exits, Lily notices her heading toward the district where the aristocrats live. Zeno quickly realizes where she's going. She's taking Zafia's accusation seriously and is headed to Calendar's manor to investigate. Krishna can't confront Calendar directly about the trafficking, so she fabricates a reason for her visit. She tells Calendar that she's heard about an increase in thefts in the area and that she intends to boost security patrols. Calendar confirms that he's been having trouble with the Lizardmen gang. Krishna then asks to inspect his estate's security measures before proceeding with the patrols, and Calendar agrees, offering to show her around. After the tour, Calendar asks for Krishna's opinion on his security setup. She praises his thoroughness but notices something odd during her inspection. She requests to use the restroom before leaving, and Calendar, unaware of her intentions, gives her permission. Krishna uses this opportunity to slip away from the office. While exploring the estate, she finds the extensive security measures around the backyard to be unusual. Her suspicions grow, and as she peers over the wall, she spots a hidden entrance. Krishna cautiously navigates the passage, her heart pounding as she discovers Zafia was right all along. Calendar was the mastermind behind the kidnappings. But before Krishna can help the trapped children, Calendar sneaks up from behind, seizing the gun she had left upstairs. He blows off her arm in one swift motion, laughing at how effortlessly he defeated a knight, mocking her for meddling where she shouldn't have. Now, he only needs to finish her off and get back to his trafficking business. Just as he's about to make his move, Zafia and Zenos arrive. Zenos, worried when Krishna went missing, had asked Zafia to guide him there. Determined to leave no survivors, Calendar switches Krishna's gun to lethal mode and shoots Zenos straight in the face. To Calendar's shock, Zenos stands unharmed, though he admits the shot stung. Panic surges through Calendar as he tries to flee, but in his haste, he drops the gun. Zenos quickly grabs it, and Calendar begins pleading for mercy. Luckily for him, Zenos sticks to a no-kill policy. However, Zenos has no such rules against causing pain. He sets the gun to non-lethal and fires, knocking Calendar unconscious. Zenos then rushes to Krishna's side, only to be met with her quiet acceptance of death. Her arm is gone, and a large chunk of her stomach has been blown away. She has given up, but Zenos reassures her that she'll be fine. Though, he adds, she should brace for a hefty bill. Moments later, Krishna is fully healed, astonished by Zenos' healing ability. She finally believes his claims about being a mediator, but any thoughts of arresting him fade. She now sees him as a genuine hero, though Zenos doesn't agree. He considers himself nothing more than a healer doing his job, ensuring no one dies. If anyone deserves the title of hero, it's Krishna, he believes, for her selfless actions in saving the children. Though misguided at times, her heart is in the right place, and she genuinely cares about a better world. Zofia and the lizard men assist in freeing the children, but with royal knights closing in, Xenos wants no part in dealing with them. He decides to leave with the others. However, before he goes, Krishna stops him, curious why he saved her despite her being an enemy. Xenos turns back with a grin, explaining that he wanted to make sure she paid her outstanding bills. She still owes him for the night she stayed at his clinic, plus the additional cost of her healing. He expects full payment by the end of the week. Krishna laughs, amused by his ridiculous reasoning. It's the first time she's laughed since losing her mother. The next day, Xenos and Lily are strolling down the street, planning to buy some tea, when Xenos notices a place he once lived in the slums. He's reminded of his past, an orphan with nothing to his name, spending his days aimlessly in an alley. One day, Aston had wandered through the slums, searching for a child to kidnap. Frustrated with his lack of success in finding the right one, he notices Xenos and decides he's the perfect candidate. Aston approaches him, offering a polite but false kindness. Aston's proposition is simple: Xenos is poor, jobless, and starving, so why not join him on an adventure? Despite the apparent kindness, Xenos hesitates, knowing that people from the slums rarely make it as adventurers. But Aston reassures him that with the right skills, anything is possible. He then asks Xenos if he has any skills. Xenos, unsure of how else to answer, admits he knows some healing magic. Aston is highly skeptical, since healing magic usually takes years of study at the Royal Academy. However, Aston doesn't care whether Xenos truly knows healing magic. He intends to use him as a distraction if things go wrong. Once Xenos agrees, Aston leads him into the forest, where the two face off against a wolf monster. During the battle, Aston takes a minor injury, prompting Xenos to use his healing magic. Aston then charges at the wolf, and Xenos amplifies his speed with more magic, enabling Aston to effortlessly decapitate the wolf in a single strike. However, Aston doesn't notice his injury being healed or his newfound speed, thinking Xenos is useless and attributing the success solely to his own strength. After years of tolerating Xenos, Aston expels him from the party, and Xenos' path since then is revealed. Meanwhile, Aston's group is not doing as well. Without Xenos, they set off on a mission to a cave, hoping to use it as leverage to win favor with powerful nobles in the kingdom, despite their dislike for the grueling labor involved. Yume informs the group that the quicker they finish, the sooner they can return to the inn and resume drinking. Andres, excited, knows that women always flock around the Golden Phoenix group, thanks to their fame for completing missions and defeating magical creatures without injury. The group soon encounters their foes, and Aston prepares for combat, instructing Guile to cast protective magic on him as he charges ahead. Despite Guile's magic, Aston still suffers a burn on his arm during the battle. Meanwhile, Yume is attacked by one of the wolves, leaving her unable to contribute further. Aston orders Andres to cast offensive spells, but Andres struggles to complete the incantation and is struck by a fireball mid-spell. Aston, stunned, wonders if his group has always been this incompetent. Realizing they won't win, he orders a retreat. Once outside, Aston questions why his team is struggling against monsters of only B rank. Andres points out that he didn't perform any better, and Guile wonders if Xenos might have been telling the truth about healing them. Aston dismisses the idea, believing someone like Xenos couldn't possibly master healing magic. However, he reluctantly considers recruiting a healer. A few days later, after recruiting a healer named Human, Aston learns she's not skilled in battlefield healing. She only provides healing in the capital but agreed to accompany them since she holds an adventurer's license. Aston refuses to explain why they need a healer, telling her to mind her business. Guile then asks Human about his own condition, as he was severely injured during the previous battle. Human confirms he will survive but notes his wounds were critical enough that he won't be able to continue adventuring. Aston shows no sympathy, brushing it off by saying Human wasn't worth keeping around anyway. The mission becomes even more important when a noble requests a scarf made from a fire fox's fur for his daughter, and completing it will earn Aston favor with Lord Fennel. Aston is willing to risk his life for the scarf, but his plan quickly falls apart when the wolves ambush the group unexpectedly. Aston retaliates and orders Guile to cast defensive spells, but as Aston attacks, he fails to land a single blow on the wolves. They launch for fireballs at him, and though he deflects 3, the 4th strikes Andres in the stomach, knocking him out cold. Aston swings wildly at the wolves but is interrupted when Human shouts for a retreat due to Andres' critical condition. Aston, frustrated, demands to know why Guile failed to protect Andres with defensive magic once they're outside. Human acknowledges that Guile's defensive spell was crucial, noting that without it, Andres would have been killed by the blast. Aston, growing impatient, demands that Human heal Andres immediately. However, Human explains that only high-level healers or saints have the power to heal such severe injuries instantly without preparation. If they don't get Andres to a medical facility soon, he won't survive. Later, Aston speaks with Lord Fennel's servant, who informs him that Lord Fennel is deeply dissatisfied. Aston begs for another chance, convinced that if given one more opportunity, he can secure the fur for the scarf. However, the nobleman's daughter's birthday has already passed, making the mission irrelevant. Lord Fennel's disappointment runs deeper than just the failure of Golden Phoenix, it stems from Aston's repeated promises of success. Had Aston been honest about the mission's impossibility earlier, the Lord would have understood and chosen another gift. Instead, Aston tries briefly to blame Xenos, but then realizes Xenos wasn't officially part of the team, so he can't be held accountable. Reluctantly, Aston bows and apologizes for the fiasco, hating every moment of it. He vows to make things right, but Lord Fennel's servant questions how he plans to do that when half of his group is nearly dead. Aston confidently replies that he will recruit replacements to offset the losses and ensure the next task is completed successfully. Afterward, as the servant leaves, Guile asks if it was wise to make such promises when they currently have no recruits. Aston dismisses the concern, stating he has a plan. Though he doesn't believe Xenos is particularly valuable, Aston recognizes that the team functioned better with him. He's convinced Xenos would rejoin Golden Phoenix, despite how poorly he was treated. The next day, Aston and Guile venture into the slums to find Xenos, but without knowing where to start, Aston decides to employ the 3 faction bosses for help. He figures they'll agree, since low-class people like them are always looking for money. Soon, Aston has a lizard man guide him to Zafir, hoping to hire her services. Zafir is uninterested, but she agrees to listen since he's offering payment. Aston introduces himself as the leader of Golden Phoenix and explains his searching for Xenos, who arrived in the slums 2 months ago. Zafir is surprised, recalling how Xenos had shared that Aston had kicked him out of the group. She's astonished that Aston would be foolish enough to seek out Xenos now and tells him to leave, as Xenos has far more important matters to deal with than entertaining him. In fact, just seeing Aston disgusts her? Offended, Aston considers attacking Zafir but quickly realizes that doing so would end badly for him, so he decides to back down. Undeterred, he goes to Linga's faction next, but upon learning who Aston is, Linga immediately tells him to leave. She reveals she considers Xenos a friend and warns Aston that if he even thinks about causing trouble, she could kill him multiple times before he could react. Aston tries once more, this time approaching Liu for help. However, she, too, rejects him and threatens to crush his skull if he bothers Xenos again. Defeated, Aston and Guile leave Liu's cave, and Aston is left stunned, unable to comprehend why all the faction bosses care so much about Xenos. He tries to convince himself that they must be talking about some other person named Xenos, because there's no way the Xenos he knows could have such influence in this place. As fate would have it, Guile notices Xenos walking down the street with Lily. The two had just finished running errands for the day and were about to head home when Aston suddenly calls out to Xenos. Xenos is surprised to see Aston and Guile again, though he's far from pleased. Without saying a word, he starts to walk away. Aston stops him and loudly announces that he came specifically to welcome Xenos back to Golden Phoenix. Before Aston can even finish, Xenos rejects him flat out. Aston is stunned by the rejection, convinced that Xenos would jump at the chance to return to their party, but Xenos wastes no time listing off the mistreatment he faced under Aston. Poor working conditions, insulting pay, and no respect. Xenos sees no reason to rejoin Golden Phoenix, but if Aston is truly desperate, Xenos suggests he could help on a few missions, assuming he's free. However, this time Xenos isn't willing to work just for recognition. He demands payment, 50,000 for minor healing and $1 million for major healing services. On top of that, Aston would need to pay separately for defensive spells and buffs. If Aston can't meet these demands, Xenos has no interest in continuing the conversation and starts walking away again. Aston, deeply insulted, draws his blade and attempts to strike, but before he can even get close, Krishna blasts him back. She tells Aston that it's incredibly foolish to attack in front of a royal knight. Krishna had actually come to find Xenos herself, but due to Aston's aggression, she's now obligated to arrest him. Aston quickly points to Guile, claiming that it was him who forced him into the attack, and then flees, clearly terrified of being imprisoned. After the chaotic scene, Xenos and Lily return home. Not long after, Zofia, Linga, and Liu arrive with some unsettling news. They inform Xenos that Aston tried to hire them to track him down. Though they all turned him down, Zofia is worried that Aston might keep pursuing Xenos. If he decides to approach the underground guild, he might be able to hire an assassin out of spite. However, assassins usually come with a hefty price, and considering Aston couldn't even gather a proper party, it's likely he's broke. Still, Zofia remains uneasy. She's heard troubling rumors about a mysterious figure known as the Guide, a member of the underground guild who takes assignments for free under certain conditions. If Aston manages to get the Guide involved, Xenos could be in serious danger. Later that night, unable to sleep due to the lingering tension from his encounter with Aston, Xenos is joined by Carmilla, who comes downstairs to keep him company out of concern. While they talk, Carmilla asks if it's true that Xenos learned healing magic in the slums. Xenos explains that his first experiment with healing magic was an attempt at resurrecting a corpse, after which healing magic simply came to him. Carmilla remarks that resurrection magic is forbidden, though Xenos defends himself, explaining he had no idea about the ban when he first tried it. On the subject of forbidden magic, Carmilla recalls something about artificial life from her time. During the Demon Lord's reign, golems created using forbidden magic were a frequent weapon in his wars. As they continue talking, Xenos hears a commotion outside, and Carmilla volunteers to investigate. To her shock, she discovers that a large portion of the slums is burning, with a rampaging golem causing destruction. And that wraps up episode. Be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss what's coming next. Turns out Aston really was that spiteful because he actually tried to get Xenos killed. But since he was flat out broke, hiring a real assassin was off the table. Instead, someone pointed him toward a shadowy figure known only as the Guide. The Guide said he'd think about doing the job pro bono, but only if Aston gave him the full rundown first. So Aston spilled everything, ranting about all the ways he'd been wronged. The Guide, halfway through the tale, just burst out laughing. Aston was a joke, pathetic, self-obsessed, and sad. Still, the idea of going after Xenos sounded entertaining, and it gave the Guide a reason to test drive one of his new toys. Meanwhile, Xenos and Carmilla had just arrived in town, only to find chaos up close. Buildings wrecked, roads shredded, it was worse than they'd thought. Not long after, Linga, Lou, and Zafir showed up to beg for help. A golem had torn through their people and left a trail of wounded in its wake. When Xenos asked where it came from, they admitted they had no idea. All they knew was that it lumbered out from the far edge of the slums, but that didn't explain much. That part made Xenos nervous. If this thing came from deep within the slums, the underground guild might be involved. But there was no time for guesses. He told the others to gather the injured so he could start healing, and promised that once everyone was safe, he'd hunt down whoever was behind this and make them pay. Elsewhere, the Guide was observing the destruction from a distance. He noted the creature's power, though its speed left much to be desired. Still, for a first field test, it was doing fine. The Guide didn't know much about Xenos yet, but he was curious to see what the man would do once his allies started dying one after another right in front of him. Back in the city, Linga, Lou, and Zafir rallied their people, ordering them to track down every survivor and bring them straight to Xenos. Once everyone was accounted for, Xenos got ready to cast, but before that, he warned Carmilla to stay clear of the area so she wouldn't get caught in the spell. Then he unleashed a high-level healing wave across the zone. Within seconds, people on death's edge were standing again. He told them to get out of the area immediately. Afterward, he moved through the zone himself, healing those who'd been missed. And yeah, he was pissed, dragged out of bed in the middle of the night to patch up dozens of people, all while having no idea if he'd even be compensated. One thing was for sure, the one responsible for unleashing that golem was going to answer for it. Problem was, no one knew who that was yet, or what their motive even was. The Guide stood in stunned silence, genuinely surprised that Xenos had managed to save every injured person. He had been almost certain a few wouldn't make it out alive amid the chaos. Watching Xenos in action made it clear, he wasn't just skilled, he was a masterclass healer. But even with all that talent, unless someone stopped the rampaging golem, the destruction would only keep escalating. Xenos had just finished patching everyone up, and with the area now cleared, the golem was still tearing through the district like a force of nature. Turning to Carmilla, Xenos asked if there was any chance the golem might eventually lose interest and leave, but she immediately shut that down. Golems don't act on impulse, they follow orders until they're completed. Judging by the chaos, this one had been told to reduce the slums to rubble. It wasn't going to stop until it finished its task. What made the situation even worse was the fact that top-tier mana stones, the kind needed to power a golem core, were believed to be extinct since the Great War. No one should have something like that anymore. Xenos had been hoping, for once, things might go smoothly. Clearly, that hope was misplaced. He couldn't just stand there while the city was reduced to dust. It had to end now. Just then, the trio from the Totally Spies universe stepped forward, offering to help him take the monster down. Xenos hesitated, warning them that he might not be able to heal them during the fight if things got dicey. They accepted the risk without flinching. This was their home too, and they weren't going to let it be erased. Xenos appreciated the backup, but rushing in blind was a bad idea. He turned to Carmilla for insight on how to stop a golem. Her answer wasn't encouraging. Unless they destroyed the mana stone inside the core, the thing would just keep reassembling itself, no matter how many hits it took. That stung. Xenos had hoped to sell the core afterward for some much-needed coin, but clearly that wasn't happening. They had no other choice. He gave the order, full assault. He'd play support while the trio moved in. Before they struck, Xenos cast an agility enhancement to boost their speed, then followed up with a power enchantment to increase their strength. The boost was enough. They managed to take out one of the golem's legs with a crushing blow. The massive enchanted stone leg exploded, sending the creature crashing to the ground. But the victory was short-lived. The instant it hit the ground, its core pulsed with light, and without missing a beat, the golem began regenerating. Then, without warning, it whipped an arm around and smacked Linga so hard she went flying through 3 buildings before finally skidding to a halt. By all logic, the impact should have shattered every bone in her body, but thanks to Xenos and a healthy dose of magic, she walked away without a single bruise. It had been ages since Xenos had been in a real battle, so he was understandably rusty, but that was wearing off quickly. He just had to keep 2 key things in mind. First, his support magic only worked within a limited range. Stray too far, and the team wouldn't feel the benefits. Second, since each buff, healing, speed, strength, had its own unique casting pattern, he couldn't activate them all at once. He had to switch them on the fly depending on the flow of combat. After watching the fight unfold for a bit, Xenos realized something: the golem didn't recover instantly. If they hit it with enough force at once, it would stay down, at least temporarily. So, he called out to the team, ordering them to cripple its legs. The golem began to collapse as planned, but just as it started to fall, everything changed. Zephyr shouted a warning. There was a child trapped inside a nearby building, and the falling golem was about to crush her. Xenos ran for her, hoping he could make it in time. He was too far to use a protective spell, so he sprinted toward the house, praying he could get her clear, but he wasn't fast enough. She should have been crushed. Yet somehow, she wasn't. The golem froze mid-collapse, shifting just enough to miss her. That shouldn't have been possible. Golems weren't designed to care, and according to Carmilla, they lacked the awareness to make protective choices. Something was wrong. Scanning it closely, Xeno saw it. Aston was inside. The realization hit him hard, and even the guide seemed caught off guard by how fast Xenos figured it out. Not that it mattered. The guide wasn't concerned. Xenos learning the truth wouldn't change anything. The mana crystal he used had been defective. It couldn't power a proper golem on its own. So instead, he used a person, Aston, as the core. He'd manipulated Aston, implanted the crystal in his chest, and fused him with the golem body permanently. Now the guide watched with interest, curious to see what Xenos would do. After all that effort to save lives, could he really end one now? Xenos exhaled slowly and told the others to fall back. The girls hesitated. They were so close to winning, they didn't understand why he wanted them to retreat. But Xenos had seen the truth now. This wasn't their fight anymore. It was his alone. Even without fully understanding the situation, they trusted him. They withdrew without protest, giving him the space he needed. Alone on the battlefield, Xenos looked at Aston and said that it was time to finish what had begun long ago. Their story had started when Aston pulled him out of the gutter, but even then, it had always been about using him. Still, when he saved that little girl, something in him cracked. Xenos recalled what Guile had once mentioned. Aston's lust for wealth and power had roots tangled in pain. Back when Aston was just a boy, his sister died because he couldn't afford a healer's fee. Since then, he'd been chasing fortune and control like a man possessed. That child must have triggered the memory, reminding him of what he'd lost. Maybe that's why he reacted without thinking. It doesn't erase all the terrible things Aston has done, but it makes Xenos pause. Maybe, just maybe, there's a flicker of something human still inside him. But there was no time to dwell. Aston had gone off the rails, and Xenos couldn't afford hesitation. He drew his scalpel. Aston tried to crush him in an instant, but Xenos dodged and transformed the scalpel into a long blade, slicing both of Aston's arms clean off. The weapon released a vapor that cut into the golem's chest, exposing Aston's true body within. Xenos hated it, but he had to act. He carved a line across Aston's torso to neutralize him. The guide stood nearby, silently stunned. It was clear from the look in his eyes, he hadn't expected Xenos to strike so efficiently. Then again, given how Aston had mistreated him for years, it could have easily been revenge. But it wasn't. Xenos' cuts were precise, too clean for vengeance. He wasn't aiming to kill. He was carefully targeting the bonds connecting Aston to the golem's core. He was methodically severing them, not ending his life. As soon as the connections were broken, Xenos moved in and began mending Aston's injuries. The guide was left speechless. The sheer control it took to do this, especially after healing an entire city minutes earlier, was staggering. And Xenos? He didn't care if Aston lived or died. Whether Aston survived didn't matter to him. What did matter was accountability. Someone had to answer for the destruction, and Xenos knew Aston couldn't afford restitution. That meant keeping him alive until he gave up the name of the golem's true creator. Even if Aston was a bastard, Xenos couldn't ignore the fact that without that severance coin, Lily wouldn't have been saved. His clinic wouldn't exist. And more than that, Xenos had sworn an oath to preserve life whenever he could. Even Aston's. So he lifted his blade once more and brought it down, shattering the mana crystal and breaking Aston's bond with the golem for good. At last, the chaos ebbed. When Aston came to, the full weight of everything hit him. For the first time, he grasped how terrifyingly capable Xenos truly was. Trapped in the golem, Aston had remained half aware, just enough to watch Xenos command city leaders mid-battle like a seasoned war general. That's when the realization hit Aston like a freight train. Xenos had gone through the exact same thing back when they were part of the same squad. Being treated like a tool, discarded when no longer useful, it finally clicked for Aston just how badly he'd screwed up. No apology could ever make up for the damage he'd caused, but he still had to face it and try. Xenos, though, wasn't in a forgiving mood. Watching Aston fumble through a sorry excuse for remorse was painful. He told Aston to lift his head, not out of compassion, but so he could get a clean shot in before walking away for good. He'd been waiting for this moment for years, the chance to punch Aston square in the face. Doing it while the guy was half out of it would have been hollow. But now that he was conscious? No reason to hold back. Xenos quietly cast a buff to boost his strength, stepped forward with purpose, and let loose the most satisfying punch he'd ever thrown. Aston dropped like a rock. Hours later, he came to with a splitting headache and Krishna looming over him. She casually mentioned that she'd seen Xenos earlier and had pieced together what happened. Then she added he was lucky nobody ended up dead, or he'd be facing murder charges. Still, she wasn't letting him off the hook. She read off a list of charges: destruction of property, physical assault, and, somehow, public nudity. Turns out Zeno's punch had knocked every last article of clothing off him. Before leaving, Krishna passed on a couple of messages from Zeno's. First, he'd taken Aston's sword while he was out cold. It was a top-tier weapon, and selling it should cover the damage bill. Second, she told him to open his hand. There, resting in his palm, was a single gold coin. That was Zeno's way of saying goodbye, or his version of a severance package. A clear sign that he never wanted to cross paths again. Aston sat there, eyes low, completely hollowed out. He knew he had this coming. And now, he was left with absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, Zeno's wasn't doing much better. Barely able to stand, his legs shaky and breath ragged, he was clearly on the edge. The others offered to help him back, but he waved them off, figured they were just as spent as he was. But the girls didn't take no for an answer. After all the times Zeno's had carried them, literally and emotionally, it was their turn to support him. Back at the clinic, Carmilla had already told Lily everything. So when Zeno's finally stepped through the door, Lily welcomed him with a smile and a warm cup of tea. That closes out episode 6. Hit that subscribe if you're ready for what comes next. Krishna's been working non-stop to track down whoever was responsible for the golem chaos, but she's hit a wall. The only thing she's managed to uncover is a single name, someone referred to as the guide. But according to all sources, the man might as well be a ghost. She retraced Aston's steps to where the guide was first encountered, only to find the place totally wiped, as if nothing ever went down there. Zafir also did some digging through her contacts in the underground circles. Word is the guide only recently began showing up in that scene. Beyond that, it's all dead ends, no one's got a clue about his background, so questioning anyone won't help. Krishna says she's marking him as a top-tier threat, but based on how thoroughly he erased his trail, she doubts he'll surface again anytime soon. Still, Zafir isn't convinced. She argues that people like him don't just disappear unless they're planning something big in the shadows. If that's the case, they'd better brace for whatever chaos is coming next. Krishna tells her not to jump the gun without solid proof, but Zafir immediately counters that Krishna just did the same thing seconds ago. Zeno's cuts in with a sigh, trying to prevent another fight, and then casually asks Krishna why she's sitting all the way across the room from the rest of them. He's clearly trying to steer things back to normal, but Krishna explains that while she's grateful for Zafir's support during the golem incident, she can't be seen getting too cozy with demi-humans, not while she still wears the title of Royal Knight. Zenos can already see where this is going and wants no part of it, so he kicks them all out of the room, telling them not to come back unless they're bleeding. Once he's alone again, Zenos drops into his chair to relax, only for Lily to quietly approach with a suggestion. She knows he's probably drained from using so much mana during the golem battle and is just about to propose a trip to the hot springs when Zafir storms back in and loudly beats her to it, inviting Zenos to unwind with her at the springs. It sounds like a good change of pace, so Zenos agrees. Zafir heads off smiling, while Lily is left stunned. Not long afterward, Linga arrives. She scans the area to make sure no one's around, then leans in to ask if Zenos wants to go to the hot springs with her. Zenos is still on board with the idea, but since Zafir already asked first, he doesn't know how to respond. Before he can come up with an answer, Linga just gives him a knowing smile and says she'll meet him there anyway before leaving. Moments later, Lou shows up, and Zenos doesn't even wait for her to speak, he already knows she's about to extend the exact same invitation. When Zenos sees Lou react like she was expecting his answer, he takes it as confirmation, and with a grin, she says she'll see him there. Not long after, Krishna pulls the exact same move. At this point, Zenos is legitimately confused, wondering why everyone suddenly thinks the hot spring is the setting for some weird romantic showdown. That's when he remembers Lily had almost said something earlier, right before the others interrupted. Now, she's just standing there, quiet and red-faced, clearly embarrassed. Zenos doesn't press her, but it's obvious she was planning to ask him the same thing. In the next room, Carmilla has heard everything and is laughing to herself watching Lily's big moment crash and burn after all that effort. Zenos, of course, is clueless about what she's finding so funny. Still, Carmilla decides there's no way she's missing the upcoming chaos. It's been ages since she had a proper soak, and this one sounds like it's going to be entertaining. She declares she's joining too. A while later, Zenos is finally enjoying some peace in the bath, until Zafir confidently walks in. He immediately points out she's on the wrong side, but Zafir just waves him off and says she put a fake out of order sign outside, so no one should come in. She's got one goal here, and it's to seduce him, no subtlety at all. But instead of going all in, she tries to keep it light, chatting while they sit in the water. She casually brings up how people say she's changed since she met him. Zenos agrees, saying she's way less aggressive now, but that doesn't mean she's not sitting way too close. Zafir was hoping to surprise him with a smooth move, but when he catches on, she loses patience and starts edging her way into his arms. Right then, Linga bursts in, accusing Zafir of cutting the line and sneaking in just to get alone time. Let's be real though, Linga wants the same thing. She suddenly acts dizzy and starts collapsing towards Zenos like she's about to faint right into his arms. But Zafir blocks her midfall, and the two immediately start wrestling like jealous rivals. That's when Lou dramatically emerges from under the water like some kind of spirit of chaos and demands to be included in whatever's going on. Xeno stares at her, completely stunned, and asks what she's even doing here, especially without a towel. Lou casually admits she's been hiding under the water the whole time, waiting for the perfect moment. She figured she'd give him a good look at her athletic figure and asks directly what he thinks. Zemma narrows her eyes, but the backlight makes it impossible to see clearly. Not that it really matters, everything about this situation is completely absurd. Xenos just sits there, silently hoping they'll wear themselves out bickering and leave him alone. Naturally, that peace is short-lived. Krishna bursts in next, seething and yelling at everyone for turning the men's bath into a circus. The others fire back immediately, accusing her of being a hypocrite since she clearly showed up for the same reason. Krishna argues that's irrelevant, but now all four of them are caught in a shouting match over Xenos, and his patience finally snaps. He explodes, telling all of them to get lost and go back to the women's side. His voice echoes so loudly that Yumin hears it from across the way. She's lounging peacefully in the women's bath and can't believe the nerve of some girls sneaking into the men's area, but she just hopes their nonsense doesn't ruin her getaway. A minute later, the intruders shuffle back into the women's bath, visibly defeated after being rejected by Xenos. Oddly enough, they're not bitter at each other. If anything, they seem to be getting along better now. Yumin's honestly surprised. It's not every day you see a human, a werewolf, an ogre, and a lizard girl casually hanging out like best friends. That evening, once everyone's done soaking, they all gather for a big, post-bath feast. Krishna still pretends she's above the chaos, acting like she's not part of the group, but Yumin keeps sneaking glances and chuckling quietly at the show. Later, Xenos tucks Lily in for the night and steps outside onto the balcony, where Carmilla's waiting. She asks if he's starting to enjoy the vacation, and he admits dinner wasn't bad, until people got drunk and started fighting over who got to sit in his lap. Carmilla bursts out laughing and warns him to enjoy the peace while it lasts, because it's bound to get hectic again. Xenos tells her to stop tempting fate, but Carmilla just shrugs. After all, a wraith's instincts are rarely wrong. That reminds Xenos, wraiths can't hang out in sunlight, so how did Carmilla even make it here? She smirks and nods toward his staff, leaning nearby. Turns out she just possessed it and had Lily bring it along. Wraiths can only inhabit things they were tied to in life, so naturally Xenos asks what she was before she died. But Carmilla dodges the question. Instead, she changes the topic, grabs a bottle, and offers to pour him a drink. The next morning, an explosion rocks the kitchen, and Yumin rushes over to investigate, only to find one of the innkeepers flat on the floor. Apparently, he had been making breakfast when the enchanted firestones powering the stove malfunctioned and exploded, hitting him head-on. His arms were in bad shape, severely burned. Yumin immediately stepped forward, introducing herself as a healer and offering her aid. She did her best to stabilize him, though she admitted that the damage was far beyond her capabilities to repair fully. She suspected his arm was a lost cause and urged those present to get him to the nearest Royal Medical Center as soon as possible. Even then, a full recovery seemed unlikely. At that moment, Xenos arrived to investigate the commotion. Yuna called out to him, asking for help in transporting the injured man. But from Xenos' point of view, the injuries didn't seem severe enough to warrant all the fuss. He decided it wasn't worth the trip and turned to leave. Before heading out, however, Xenos offered a quiet gesture of appreciation for their hospitality at the hot springs. He healed the man silently, without asking for anything in return. He walked off with Lily, and to Yumin, it appeared as though he had done nothing and simply walked away. She was just about to criticize him when she noticed the man's burns had completely vanished. For a moment, she questioned if maybe her own magic had worked better than expected. But no, she knew her skill level. Such an instantaneous and complete recovery was far beyond her reach. Only elite-level spellcasters, revered saints, or legendary healers could pull that off. And that's when it hit her. Xenos had to be a healer of extraordinary class. She immediately reported what she saw to her superior, Anados, who was stunned to hear that someone of such immense talent was wandering around unrecognized. If Yumin's assessment was accurate, this was someone the kingdom would want on their side. Tracking him, however, wouldn't be easy. Yumin remembered only that he had black hair. Anados initially brushed it off, thinking anyone who healed without asking for gold must be decent enough. But then Yumin casually added that Xenos had also been wearing a black overcoat, and that changed everything. Anados paused and reconsidered. Now he definitely wanted to find this mysterious healer. Yumin was fine with that but asked how he planned to locate someone so elusive. Anados thought for a moment, if Xenos didn't appear in any official healer records, he was likely unregistered and operating in the slums. That suited him fine, as he already had a method in mind to draw him out. Later that same day, Zahn burst into Xenos' modest clinic, dragging a barely conscious Anado behind him, urgently requesting help. Zahn didn't know the man's identity, only that he'd suddenly started coughing up blood and collapsed, so Zahn had rushed him over. Xenos quickly cautioned everyone to stay back in case it was infectious and began a rapid magical examination. What Xenos sees isn't encouraging. The man's lungs are in terrible shape, resembling symptoms from red lung syndrome. Alarmed, Xenos quickly tells Lily to step back, just in case. That illness devastated entire populations in the past and was infamous for how fast it spread, even though it was supposedly eradicated after a cure was developed. Xenos has no idea how this guy could have contracted it. Then, out of nowhere, the man suddenly sits up, looking perfectly alert, and nonchalantly compliments Xenos for identifying the condition so quickly. He introduces himself as Anados, a senior healer from the Royal Hospital, though he freely admits that healing magic isn't exactly his strong suit. At that moment, Newman bursts in, frantic and furious, accusing Anados of faking a dangerous disease just to meet Xenos. Anados doesn't deny it. In fact, he admits he had no other way to meet him directly. He takes a small vial from his coat and drinks the contents, saying it's a neutralizer. Earlier, he had taken a custom-made compound that simulated the symptoms of red lung, betting that it would get the locals to bring him straight to Xenos. Now that he's taken the counter-agent, the mimicry has ended. Xenos asks why he'd even have something like that, and Anados explains that he created it long ago while working with red lung strains during the vaccine trials. This instantly clicks for Xenos. He realizes Anados is the same doctor who created the red lung cure and gained elite recognition for saving so many lives. But Anados shifts the focus, saying the real reason he came was because Xenos had been described in a way that triggered old memories, particularly the black coat. He asks Xenos where he got it, and Xenos responds that it was a gift from his teacher, though he hasn't seen his mentor in some time. Anados then reveals his offer. He wants Xenos to join the Royal Hospital staff. There's a developing crisis that requires someone with Xenos' skill and insight. Before they can continue, the girls barge in, having caught word that some shady visitor was pestering him, and they're more than ready to step in. Staying composed, Anados reassures them that he's not trying to force Xenos into anything. He's simply extending an opportunity, and Xenos seems open to it. Zafir looks at him skeptically and asks if he's really considering it, and Xenos confirms, it's the smart choice. Now that the Royal Hospital is aware of his underground clinic, aligning with someone like Anados is a strategic move. Plus, back when Red Lung was still active, Anados personally made sure vaccine doses reached the slums for free. That kind of action speaks volumes to Xenos, and he decides that Anados is someone he can place his trust in. As part of the arrangement, Xenos heads to the Royal Hospital with Anado and Human. He's taken aback by the sheer size of the facility. Once they reach Anado's office and Xenos gets settled, Anado begins outlining the mission he wants Xenos to take on. There's been a pattern of unexplained disappearances, and Anado wants Xenos to look into it. Xenos doesn't object to the assignment but mentions that surveillance work isn't exactly where he excels. He asks Anado if he's sure about assigning someone like him to this task. Anado reassures him, noting that as an official member of the Royal Hospital, Xenos will gain access to several unique programs that should make information gathering simpler. Still, Xenos is cautious. If he draws too much attention, someone could uncover who he really is. Anado tells him not to worry, he's already put together a cover story for Xenos. As far as anyone else is concerned, he's recently returned from overseas studies. Xenos doubts that will fool everyone, especially other seasoned healers, but Anado insists that his endorsement is all the credibility Xenos needs. Afterward, Human shows Xenos to the dorms where he'll be staying during his assignment. To his surprise, Lily is already there waiting for him. He immediately asks why she's there, and Human explains that Anado approved the necessary paperwork to have Lily move in. The hospital's rules allow healers to live with close relatives or spouses. Lily jokes that this officially makes her Xenos' wife now. In reality, Human registered her as Xenos' younger sister. She was the one who pushed to have Lily accompany him in the first place, figuring that having someone familiar nearby would help him adjust. Xenos, who had been anxious about leaving her behind, is genuinely grateful. Human then heads out to give Xenos a moment to settle in, but soon after, Carmilla shows up too. While he understands Lily being there, Xenos is completely baffled by Carmilla's sudden appearance in the capital. She doesn't have much of a reason for showing up, she just likes to keep things chaotic around Xenos, as strange things tend to happen wherever he is. Xenos warns her that with so many healers in one place, someone might try to exorcise her if she's spotted. Carmilla, however, is totally unbothered. Aside from Xenos himself, very few healers here are even capable of threatening her. Later, Xenos sits down with Human in the hospital cafeteria, and she asks how he's adjusting to his new environment. He admits it's manageable so far, though things are about to get hectic. Plus, he still has no idea how to secure a formal healing license. Human offers to help, explaining the process. It starts with passing a healer aptitude test, and if you qualify, you gain entry to the Royal Healing Academy. From there, it's years of intense training, and if you manage to push through all of it, you can finally take the certification test to earn your healer license. It sounds grueling, and Xenos can't wrap his head around why anyone would willingly go through that. But Human tells him that's just scratching the surface. Once you're certified, there's a whole new set of exams waiting if you want to sign up for adventuring or take military assignments. There are even stricter standards if you aim to climb the healer rankings. Most of the people in this facility are either focused on conducting studies or trying to boost their academic credentials. To Xenos, it all sounds like a mountain of work he'd rather not deal with. He interrupts Human and asks her to cut to the part about the people who went missing. Human tells him one of the missing individuals was named Offred, an elite healer and top-tier researcher. The man had a reputation for being both kind-hearted and a genius in the medical field. Anado even mentioned that Offred had a hand in creating the cure for red lung disease. Xenos figures Offred sounds like someone important enough to rescue, but he still doesn't know enough, so he asks if there are any clues. Right on cue, the cafeteria doors swing open and in walks Goldrin. Xenos wants to know who the guy is, and Human tells him that's the hospital's vice director, also a Class 7 advanced healer. Xenos isn't familiar with the ranking system, so Human breaks it down for him. Healers are divided into 3 categories: beginner, advanced, and elite. Each one has 7 ranks, and being a level 7 advanced healer is the peak before reaching elite status. In other words, Goldrin holds serious influence, and rumor has it he's aiming to take over as the next hospital director. The current director is hardly ever around anymore due to old age, so Goldrin has practically been in charge, but things haven't exactly improved under his watch. Human says that nowadays, wealthy patients get red carpet treatment while the poor are lucky to walk out with a cold compress and a sympathy card. Goldrin supposedly stopped trying to improve his healing a while ago, and word on the street is that he bribed his way to level 7. Xenos has a pretty good sense of the kind of person Goldrin is and would rather steer clear of him. But avoiding him might not be possible. Human suspects Goldrin could be tied to Offred's disappearance. Goldrin has a habit of recruiting top healers to boost his reputation, and Offred fit that description perfectly. Xenos asks if Goldrin ever said anything publicly about Offred going missing, but Human says he outright denied any involvement. Xenos knows what has to be done, but the real challenge is figuring out how to get close to someone with that much authority. Human tells him not to worry about that. If Xenos demonstrates his high-level healing skills during one of the hospital's training events, Goldrin is bound to notice eventually. Xenos is confident in his abilities, but he's never really had the chance to compete with other healers, so he doesn't know how he measures up, but he's willing to try. Just then, another of Human's co-workers, Crescent, walks up and jokes about her hiding out in the corner without him. Human tells him she can eat wherever she pleases, but Crescent misinterprets her comment and assumes she's just mocking him. Then his attention shifts to Xenos, and he recognizes him as the guy backed by some top-tier healer. Jealousy bubbles up, but instead of causing a scene, Crescent drops a subtle insult, telling Xenos not to disgrace the person supporting him, then strides off. Xenos turns to Human, confused, and asks what just happened. She explains Crescent is one of her classmates and wasn't always like this, but ever since Goldrin recruited him, his pride's gotten the better of him. That triggers a memory in Xenos. He remembers being a kid, stumbling across a dead body in an alley and experimenting with magic, trying to resurrect it. Just as he was about to succeed, someone hit him hard on the head. That someone, his future mentor, told him not to waste his potential on the dead and instead to use it to help the living. That moment changed everything. Human had taken Xenos under her wing and started teaching him healing magic alongside another student named Veritra. Within a year, both had advanced enough to handle serious injuries, but their teacher warned them, patching up wounds is the basics. You're not even a second-rate healer until you truly understand what healing is, their mentor had said. Now, back in the present, Xenos is attending his first official lecture at the academy. The subject of the day happens to be undead beings. The material isn't new to him, his adventuring days covered most of this, but he's impressed by how well the content is presented for those without field experience. When the professor opens up the floor for questions, a student asks about wraiths. The instructor doesn't have much detail to offer. He simply states that wraiths are at the peak of the undead hierarchy. They're rarely encountered, and when they are, they usually annihilate the entire party. His advice? Run, especially if the wraith speaks. That level of awareness usually means it's something far beyond dangerous. Xenos is a little shaken, thinking about the talking wraith living at his place with Lily. He never realized Carmilla was considered that lethal, but yeah, he's not about to speak up and stir chaos. Then the professor asks if anyone's had real encounters with undead. Crescent is the first to stand. He introduces himself with way too much flair and starts boasting about his adventuring days, claiming he's taken down around 30 ghosts. The class lights up with excitement, clapping and cheering, which only inflates his ego further. Crescent notices that one person isn't clapping, Xenos, and decides to call him out, casually asking how many spirits he's banished. Though Xenos could take on 50 if he really tried, he doesn't want the spotlight, so he shrugs and says he's handled 30 before. Crescent instantly calls him out, but Xenos doesn't back down, calmly stating that, yes, he's fought 30 at once. The room goes completely silent. Everyone stares, stunned by what they just heard. Someone finally breaks the silence, asking how that's even possible. Xenos explains that he once wandered into a cursed maze and got mobbed, so he just kept spamming healing magic until nothing was left. That's when it clicks. He's talking about the Garmenton Labyrinth, a place so deadly even top-tier adventurers usually steer clear. The entire class erupts. They're all blown away, except Crescent, who's fuming, convinced Xenos is making it up because he refuses to believe he's been outdone. The next lecture focuses on magic circles, and Crescent purposely grabs the seat right next to Xenos, clearly trying to assert dominance. Xenos never cared much for that stuff, he's always thought magic circles were overhyped, but he sits through it anyway. The professor sketches a basic circle on the board and asks if anyone wants to replicate it for the class. Crescent immediately volunteers, striding up with full confidence. He draws a clean, accurate healing circle, and the professor compliments his work. Smirking, Crescent then tells the professor Xenos wants to try too. Xenos didn't plan on getting involved, but now he's been volunteered. Like he said, magic circles never interested him. But he does recall one strange one his teacher once showed him. He walks up and draws it. Crescent laughs at the unfamiliar design, assuming it's wrong. But when the professor sees it, he freezes. What Xenos drew isn't ordinary, it's similar to a regeneration circle, but not quite. Xenos explains that it's a regional variant. If someone's missing fingers, it might regrow one at random. It's wildly inefficient and burns mana like crazy, most healers couldn't manage it. But Xenos activates it effortlessly, even admitting it's useless for him since his own healing techniques are faster. The professor instantly recognizes Xenos as someone far beyond his peers and invites him to join his research team. Xenos politely declines. Crescent, meanwhile, is left burning with jealousy, frustrated by the attention Xenos keeps drawing. By the end of the day, rumors about him start circulating through campus. Supposedly, he's strong enough to wipe out 30 spirits at once. Goldrin hears the gossip but doesn't care much for talk. That changes when a report comes in, undead activity near the cemetery. Goldrin gets an idea, sends Xenos to investigate. If the kid really is that capable, maybe he's worth keeping an eye on. That evening, Xenos leads a group of students on an exorcism mission, with Crescent among them. Crescent takes command and guides the team forward, but they quickly find themselves surrounded, and Crescent begins to lose composure. Just as the situation starts to spiral, Xenos unleashes a potent healing spell that instantly eradicates every ghost. Xenos praises the group for their efforts in drawing out the spirits so he could finish them off. Before he can finish, Crescent interrupts, claiming it was his healing spell that saved everyone. Since the others don't know the truth, they accept his words and believe he's the one responsible for the victory. He even encourages them to boast to their instructors about his heroic feat. Then, walking up to Xenos, Crescent bluntly states he'll never acknowledge Xenos' talents. Xenos isn't bothered by Crescent's hunger for recognition, but he warns Crescent that if he wants to be a true hero, he shouldn't be leaving just yet, because the real danger hasn't appeared. Crescent is clueless about what Xenos means, but moments later, the earth splits open and a massive zombie king emerges. The students are stunned by the terrifying sight but remain confident that Crescent will handle it. No one else is willing to confront the beast. Yumin and Xenos would step in, but they don't want to steal Crescent's spotlight. So, they decide to watch and see how Crescent fares. To his credit, Crescent tries his best. He fires off his most powerful healing spell at the zombie king, but it barely scratches the creature. Victory is impossible, but his pride forces him to keep dodging and weaving, avoiding being crushed. Amid the chaos, Yumin tells Xenos that strong undead often attract weaker ones, meaning the earlier ghosts were probably drawn by the zombie king. But Xenos suspects something more sinister at play. Meanwhile, Crescent is getting pummeled badly, and Xenos considers intervening. However, Yumin holds him back, still concerned for Crescent but wanting him to learn a tough lesson. Crescent manages to hold out by repeatedly casting healing spells whenever he hits a wall, until the zombie finally catches him. Just as the monster is about to devour Crescent, Xenos steps in. Charging one of his most powerful spells, he unleashes a mega heal that floods the area with blinding light and a wave of pure restorative energy, incinerating the rotting creature completely. With the zombie king destroyed, the mission is finally over. But Yumin's earlier observation about undead being drawn to stronger undead lingers in Xenos' mind, and he soon realizes that Carmilla is the true source behind the ghosts and the zombies' appearance. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for the next part. After some time, Xenos returns home and casually asks Carmilla if she knows anything about the recent increase in undead sightings nearby. To his surprise, she's completely unaware that she's the one drawing those creatures in. She looks uneasy and timidly asks if he's thinking of kicking her out because of it. Xenos pauses, weighing the situation. Given how her presence seems to affect the local environment, he actually concludes that it might be safer to keep her nearby. Carmilla's face flushes deep red. No one has ever told her they wanted her around in her entire undead life. Touched, she vows to stick close to Xenos from now on. That said, she cheekily warns that she'll still take every chance to mess with him. The next day, Crescent reports back to his superior, unsure whether he's about to be praised or reprimanded for how the recent undead incident played out. Rumors are swirling that he wiped out the monsters with a massive spell, but Crescent knows the truth. That it was Xenos who did the heavy lifting. His superior brushes it off, saying Xenos didn't make much of an impression, so the rumors must be overblown. Because of that, Xenos won't be joining Goldrin's elite group after all. Crescent could have taken the win and walked away with the accolades, but the guilt is eating at him. He finally confesses that it was Xenos who eliminated the undead threat and defeated the zombie king. He saw it happen firsthand. Crescent leaves feeling pretty terrible, knowing that his own credibility likely took a hit. But at least Xenos got the recognition he deserved. In Crescent's mind, that settles the debt between them. Not long after, Unending stops by and informs Xenos with a grin that Goldrin's research division has officially reached out. They want to meet him. Xenos is pleasantly surprised, not expecting this turn of events, especially since he assumed Krishna would have taken full credit. Still, it's a major milestone toward getting into Goldrin's inner circle. Unending tells him not to celebrate just yet. There's still an interview with one of the professors, and that's going to be its own kind of test. Xenos doesn't quite understand why joining a research faction requires so many steps, but Unending explains that Goldrin holds significant sway and is highly selective. Xenos then questions why Goldrin has that much influence in the first place. If he's merely a high-level healer, shouldn't someone like Unending, who technically outranks him, be more influential? Unending chuckles, saying formal titles don't always reflect true authority. His own standing comes from pharmaceutical breakthroughs, not political power. Xenos doesn't fully grasp the political dynamics, but he says he's off to meet Goldrin's people, and the others wish him the best. Xenos finally arrives at the meeting room. After a brief introduction from Goldrin, the first question out of his mouth is what Xenos actually brings to the table. Xenos simply responds that he's a healer and, well, he heals. Goldrin isn't impressed. He calls the answer too shallow. Healing alone isn't special, not when anyone with the basics can do that. Someone like Xenos should be aiming for something much greater. Goldrin goes on to emphasize how vital healers are to this nation, arguing that the country's survival probably hinges on their efforts. Yet it's the powerful few who truly reap the rewards. That's why Goldrin is determined to rise into the top ranks, not to change things, but to profit from the same system that exploits others. He firmly believes a person's value is based on how useful they are, and he has no interest in those who bring nothing to the table. After spelling out this harsh outlook, he instructs Xenos to recreate the magical circle he previously demonstrated in class. Xenos isn't sure what the point is, but he complies anyway. After reviewing the circle, Goldrin stands and announces that starting tomorrow, Xenos will officially be part of his lab. The next day, as Xenos walks the halls, he sees Goldrin's team passing in formation. At the end of the line, Krishna spots him and waves him over, urging him to catch up and fall in line. Krishna greets him with a grin and reminds him to show proper respect to his seniors. After all, he joined first, and Xenos is only there thanks to his recommendation. Xenos asks why Krishna even told the truth back then, since staying silent would have saved his reputation. Krishna admits guilt played a part, but also confesses he thought aligning with Xenos might pay off in the long run. Xenos appreciates the honesty, but he's more curious about the strange formation. Krishna explains it's part of Goldrin's standard routine, daily rounds. Xenos wonders if a full team is really necessary just to check on one person, but Krishna says it's more about optics. Goldrin only treats high-profile patients, and showing up with a full group sends a message. But Xenos didn't join for appearances. He's here to uncover Goldrin's secrets, and he can't do that from the back of the line. Without a word, he moves up to the front. The patient complains that his foot's been aching since yesterday. Goldrin quickly inspects it and diagnoses a minor sprain. He announces that he'll only need 3 assistants this time. At first, Xenos isn't sure what that means, but then watches in surprise as Goldrin casts a spell and draws energy straight from 3 nearby students. He channels the energy into the man's foot to mend the injury, and while the treatment works, it's clear the students involved take a hit from it. Xenos heads straight back to Krishna and demands to know what kind of spell Goldrin just pulled off. Krishna explains that Goldrin specializes in a branch of magic known as vitality transfer. It allows the caster to redirect life energy from one person into another, making it possible to heal even serious wounds without requiring immense personal strength. If someone's badly hurt, this spell lets you borrow stamina or essence from others to accelerate their recovery. For bigger injuries, it takes more energy, so the toll is often split among several donors. Usually, the only side effect is tiredness. Xenos thinks it's a pretty cool technique, and it also makes sense why Goldrin keeps so many healers around. But Krishna hints there's more to it. Rumor is, the current director may be retiring soon, and Goldrin's already working to secure support for a leadership bid. Xenos appreciates the insight and then takes the chance to ask if Krishna's ever heard of someone named Alfred. Krishna nods, saying he knows of him, but never really liked the guy. Alfred once got an invite to one of Goldrin's private dinner events, and then disappeared. Curious, Xenos asks what kind of party it was, and Krishna explains these are high-status dinners hosted only for Goldrin's trusted inner circle. Getting invited is a big deal, but ever since that night, no one's seen or heard anything from Alfred. Xenos later brings all this to Unending, thinking it might be the breakthrough they need. Unending, however, says it's far from enough. It strongly hints that Goldrin's connected to Alfred's disappearance, but doesn't prove anything. Unending wants Xenos to climb the ranks, get into Goldrin's inner circle, and secure an invitation to one of those dinners. If he can manage that, Unending promises extra payment. Xenos agrees, but only under one condition. Once this mission ends, regardless of the outcome, Unending must reveal everything he knows about Xenos' former master. Meanwhile, over in the slums, Lingda is fiddling with the lock on Xenos' clinic door. After a bit of work, she finally pops it open. She came by to clean up the place while he's gone, and maybe snoop through a few things while she's at it. As she starts to poke around, she senses someone else nearby and prepares to fight, only to find it's Sophia. Both of them demand to know why the other is there, but once Lingda notices the mop in Zophia's hand, it's obvious they had the same idea. Moments later, Lu crashes through the door, again, with cleaning supplies of her own. Zofia and Lingda had a hunch she'd show up eventually, though they really wish she hadn't smashed the door to make her entrance. It's just another headache for them to deal with. The next morning in the capital, Xenos finally catches up with Crescent, who tells him he's just been honored with the task of watching over Goldrun's beloved dog. In reality, Crescent is just offloading the responsibility onto Xenos, and Xenos can't help but wonder if Crescent is even doing any actual research. Crescent mentions that Goldrun's currently tied up in a private gathering with the top 7 noble houses he's been working hard to win over. That's why they're stuck doing pet duty. Crescent doesn't mind, though. He sees it as just another step toward getting closer to Goldrun's inner circle. When Xenos asks if he's really aiming for a promotion, Crescent confirms that's exactly what he's after. His goal is to climb the ladder and enjoy the rewards that come with it, all the wealth, comfort, and perks. Xenos seems surprised, thinking that most healers got into the profession to genuinely help people. In a perfect world, maybe, but Crescent says the reality is different. He admits there was a time when he dreamed of healing the sick and saving lives, but his magic can only do so much, and it can't fix everything. Since he can't save everyone, he'd rather use his talents to build a life of comfort and luxury, chasing money, women, and everything that comes with it. Just then, a guy named Bonds walks up and asks Crescent if he's on dog duty for Goldrun again. Crescent plays it cool, saying he's just doing what he has to, but Bonds isn't buying it. He tells him cozying up to Goldrun won't be enough to actually move up the ranks. After dropping that bit of advice, Bonds strolls off and Xenos asks who that guy even was. Crescent says he's Goldrun's first secretary, but Xenos can't believe someone so careless could land a position like that. Crescent gets the confusion, but explains that Bonds got the role because he's an old friend of Goldrun's, so now he pretty much just coasts through his duties. Right on cue, Bonds suddenly shouts Crescent's name, clearly overhearing the jab, and without warning, chucks a bottle his way. Luckily for Crescent, Bonds is too drunk to aim properly, and it completely misses. Unfortunately, it smashes near Goldrun's dog, startling her so badly that she takes off running. Crescent instantly panics. If anything happens to Madam Milk, he knows he's done for. He bolts after her, but just as she darts into the street, a carriage comes flying by and hits her. Crescent races over and immediately starts trying to heal her. He launches a powerful restoration spell at her injuries, but even with that, Milk still looks like she got flattened. Xenos gives her a once-over and tells him not to freak out, he's stopped the bleeding, so she'll pull through. But Crescent's freaking out anyway. Surviving isn't enough, she's going to be scarred, and the only reason Goldrun adores this mutt is because she's pristine and picture perfect. If he sees her in this state, Crescent's toast. Not wanting to let Crescent get burned, Xenos lifts his hand and channels his own advanced healing spell on Milk. Crescent tries to stop him, saying it's pointless. Sure, Xenos is insanely strong, he did solo a zombie king, but this kind of advanced regeneration is next level, and making flesh heal without a single blemish is something only elite medics can pull off. But while Crescent's mid-rant, Xenos wraps it up. Milk's back to normal, no wounds, no damage, not even a scratch. Her ribs? Fixed. She's flawless again, like she was never hurt in the first place. Xenos casually advises that she still rest for the day. Later on, he returns home and finds Yeoman already there waiting. Curious, he asks what's going on, and she says she just wanted to know if he'd go on a walk with her. He wasn't expecting that, but he agrees. Once they're alone in the woods, he asks if something's bothering her. She looks over and says she wants to apologize. If she hadn't been so useless, maybe she could have caught Goldrun's attention instead, and then Xenos wouldn't be dragged into this mess. But Xenos shakes his head. She doesn't owe him anything, Arnado's already making it up to him. Plus, if it weren't for this wild situation, he never would have made it into the Royal Hospital, let alone had the chance to uncover more about his master's history. He's gaining more than she thinks, so she shouldn't beat herself up. Yeoman feels a bit better hearing that, but since he brought it up, she admits she doesn't actually know much about his master and asks what kind of man he was. Xenos admits he doesn't really know himself, the guy was always kind of shady. Still, he taught Xenos how to read, how to write, and shared everything he could about magic and the world, so Xenos owes him everything. Yeoman says that reminds her of Arnado. When she was a newbie healer, he took her under his wing and passed down tons of research. But Arnado's so consumed by his work, his girlfriend eventually left him, and since then, Yeoman's been the one looking after him. That sets off a bit of a warning bell, so Xenos asks what their actual relationship is. Yeoman clears it up, Arnado is her uncle, which makes their closeness make more sense. On their way back to the Royal Hospital campus, Crescent comes sprinting toward them. He drops to the ground, practically begging Xenos for help. And from the sheer panic on his face, this isn't some trivial issue, it's something major. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, please like, share and subscribe for the next part.